Inspiring interviews with today's top landlords. This is the Rental Income Podcast. And now, Dan Lane.
Joel, I want to talk to you more about this. You have an idea that if you want to increase your rental income, you don't need to necessarily buy more properties.
Well, I think we can talk about some ideas regarding making your existing properties a little more profitable, kind of dig down into that a little bit. You don't always have to buy more properties to make more money. You just have to do a better job or have some different strategies with the ones you've got.
On the podcast today, Joel is going to share with us some of the ways that he's been able to increase his revenue without having to necessarily buy more properties. Joining us on the show today from Erie, Pennsylvania is Joel Miller. We'll take a quick break to thank our sponsors. We'll come right back and we'll talk to Joel. Billion-dollar investors don't typically park their cash in high-yield savings accounts. Instead, they often use one of the premier passive income strategies for institutional investors, private credit. Now the same passive income strategy is available to investors of all sizes thanks to the Fundrise Income Fund, which has more than $600 million invested and a 7.9% distribution rate. With traditional savings yields falling, it's no wonder private credit has grown to be a $1 trillion asset class in the last few years. Visit fundrise.com/RIP to invest in the Fundrise Income Fund in just minutes. That's Fundrise, FUNDRISE.com/RIP. The fund's total return in 2025 was 8%, and the average annual return since inception is 7.8%. Past performance does not guarantee future results. Current distribution rate as of 12/31/2025. Carefully consider the investment material before investing, including objectives, risk, charges, and expenses. This and other information can be found in the Income Fund's perspective at fundrise.com/income. This is a paid advertisement. Are you looking for a rental income without the headaches? Mid-South Home Buyers handles everything from renovations to in-house property management in both Memphis and Little Rock. They have turnkey cash-flowing properties available for purchase today. Just visit midsouthhomebuyers.com right now to view their inventory and start your journey. That's midsouthhomebuyers.com. It's a lot of work to find a really good rental property, and when you actually find that property, you want to make sure you're working with a lender that can get that loan closed. The lender that I recommend is Chaley Ridge from Ridge Lending Group. She's a nationwide lender, and her specialty is helping investors finance rental properties. She has a ton of loan programs, and she can find something customized to you for your situation. If you want to find out more or you're ready to get started today, just go to ridgelendinggroup.com. That's RIDGE lendinggroup.com, NMLS 42056. Now, one thing that's really important, I think, is doing rent increases because every year your property taxes are going to go up, your insurance is going to go up. Right. And if you're not raising rent to keep up with that, your return is going down. So how do you keep up with the rent increases?
The conversation every year, assuming you have a one-year lease with your tenants about a rent increase, is one of the least favorite conversations you want to have. So to avoid that, what I would do, and I'm actually back to doing this now that the market has sort of settled. Okay, if I signed a one-year lease with somebody, I'm going to put right on that lease what their new rent will be for. I would do 3 years in advance. Now that would be whenever I could predict the normal increases that would be expected from my history on that property in that neighborhood. Okay. And I would actually write those new amounts on their lease. It says, if renewed, then the rent, and I'd have the dates, which would be the dates picking up after the initial term of the lease. I would have what their rents would be if they're staying, and I would point that out to the tenant. And they love that because that way they know what the rent increase is going to be. They don't have to worry about, I don't want to let the landlord know I like this place too much because he might be jacking up my rent because he knows I don't want to move, you know. No, I'm telling you ahead of time what your rent's going to be. And so we totally avoid that conversation every year. All that happens is, if they don't want to renew, they need to give 30 days written notice. In other words, at the beginning of the final month. But if I don't hear from them, then, about two-thirds of the way through the month, I simply remind them that, hey, per the terms of your lease, don't forget your rent increases by beginning with your next month's rent. And oh, by the way, don't forget to add an additional whatever the rent increase is, let's call it $30, to your payment next month to be added to your security deposit so that it stays the same as your rent.
Oh,
Point
right,
being,
right.
never miss an opportunity to increase a tenant's security deposit.
Interesting.
You don't want
Yeah.
to have a long-term tenant there that only has a security deposit equal to the rent that they paid 5, 10 years ago, because now you've defeated the purpose of keeping in the bank an amount equal to pay their final month's rent if they skip out. You
Right.
see?
I'd never thought of that before. That's a really good idea. So
Yeah.
is $30 about what you typically raise rent?
Well, that would be a good example for an average apartment in our area here. Like, let's say that we're talking about an average apartment in the, you know, $600 to $900 range, right
Okay.
around in there. We have more expensive ones than that the rent commensurately goes up.
Now let's talk about some upgrades and whether they're worth it if they're going to get you a higher rent. The first one is LVP versus carpet. Now I like LVP because it's less maintenance, it's going to last longer. Do you find that you can get higher rent doing LVP?
I haven't found any difference between LVP and carpet. I mean, I don't have people walking in going, oh my gosh, I'm so glad you don't have carpet here. I love this LVP. I'll
Right.
take it. And I don't have it the other way either.
Okay.
It's
What do you generally put in your rentals?
it depends on the room, you
Okay.
know. Like for example, if you got a two-story place, probably want to put carpet on the second floor because LVP is noisy, you know.
Right, right.
And it's typically bedrooms on the second floor, and people like to feel carpet under their feet, bare feet whenever they're in their bedrooms and so on. But I might be inclined to put LVP in a first floor in uh, living rooms and um, kitchens and so on.
Now, what about upgrading fixtures? Like that can be pretty cheap. Does that
That's
help
a great
you
great
rent
way.
faster or maybe get more rent?
Yeah, I mean, I think that that's one of the things you can do to um, give the overall appearance that you're keeping up with things there, to freshen it up without spending a whole lot of money. Things like the actual light fixtures themselves and outlets and switches. Making in this place, they were sort of mixed between ivory and brown, and the cover plates weren't in great shape. So we did all that. That's cheap. And the plumbing fixtures, fortunately, didn't have to do a toilet there, but or sinks, but things like towel racks. Oh, another thing was doorknobs.
Oh
You
yeah,
know,
that's an easy one.
doorknobs are
Yeah.
a lot of times in older places or places that have been around a while. You end up with some sort of a mismatched set of doorknobs throughout the apartment. From different styles and colors. Just go through and make them all. In our case here, in this my example, oil rub brown.
Now,
You
what
know,
about a washer and dryer? Do you put a washer and dryer in every unit?
no,
Okay.
we have inadvertently had washers and do have washers and dryers in there, but they are typically because they were in good enough shape when they were left there by the tenants that owned them and moved out, and they didn't need to take them where they were going. And so, we've ended up with some nice ones in apartments that, uh, the tenants in future years have enjoyed.
Now, do you put in there in the lease that the washer and dryer is as is so that you're not having to repair that if it breaks? or do you just
No,
fix it?
I know that strategy, but it's just kind of the same as providing the stove and refrigerator. We put in the lease that we are providing it because you don't want a situation where you're throwing somebody out and all of a sudden, the constable's there and and they're carting out your washer and dryer and your stove and your refrigerator, and you go, hey, that belongs
Mm,
here,
right,
and the constable,
right.
well, you got to be able to show that it's belongs to you by putting it on the lease. But I tell people, look, uh, the lease lists certain generic things you're responsible for, like the structure and so on. And I said also because we're renting you the stove, refrigerator, washer, dryer, dishwasher, garbage disposal, and so on. We're going to pay to repair the operation of those things. But if you break something on them, that's on you. Like, for example, somebody breaks a glass shelf inside of a refrigerator. That's on them, But I kind of, to answer your question, if I've got a washer and dryer there, uh, and I am getting the rent for having it there, I would treat those the same as I would treat a stove and refrigerator in terms of my responsibility to repair them.
Okay. That makes sense. Now, what about pets? Like pets can be a great source of income, maybe getting extra rent or maybe a flat fee. But
Yeah.
you also have the risk that the pet is going to maybe do some damage to the property. How do you feel about that? Do you do pets or do you pass on that?
We occasionally have a pet, but generally advertise our units as no pets properties. And I don't want to offend anybody that is all into pets out there. And there are some landlords that will can demonstrate how having the pets can make you more money. And I don't think it's hard to demonstrate that if you screen the pets like you screen the tenants. Don't just let tenants get an animal that you don't know anything about and expect that everything's going to go well. The best landlords that are actively renting to pets are doing a pet fee as opposed to a pet deposit. In other words, a pet deposit implies that it would be refundable, when they move out. A pet fee is like it's just you're paying the fee and that's it. It's a part of the privilege of us allowing you to have the pet is to pay a fee, several $100s going in, and that's you've paid it and we keep it. And then of course charging a higher rent, but they're doing a pet fee, and they are specifying an extra amount that is for the pet being there. They are specifying the maximum number of pets and the additional rent for multiple pets. And they are having the tenants sign a pet agreement, which is an addendum to the lease that spells out their responsibilities. Like this animal coming in has to demonstrate that it's had all its shots, it's spayed or neutered, and it doesn't have a bite history. And it's organized. It's not just you're only screening the tenants and, oh, by the way, we've got a dog. Sure, bring the dog.
Right, right.
It can't be that way, or it's a recipe for disaster. But yes, you can make more money from a property that has the pets than if you just had the tenants there, assuming that the pets are not, causing damage or chasing away other good tenants that the dog is threatening or something like that.
And what about doing a shorter term than a year? A lot of times people will pay for flexibility, maybe if they can do a 6-month lease or whatever
Yeah,
time frame.
sure. That's a thing. A 1-year lease, you might have at a certain amount, and that basically means those people locked in, and you don't have to worry about trying to find a new tenant. And everybody knows that the biggest source of uh, subtractions from the bottom line with rental property is downtime in between tenants. When
Right.
it's like the
Yep.
plane that takes off with an empty seat. You can't go resell the seat after the plane lands.
All
Well, you
right.
can't get rent from the month that passed that went by in between tenants. So you want to avoid that. So a higher rent for a shorter term lease is certainly justified, and people understand that, and they would be willing to pay extra. Um, there could be reasons on both sides of the equation, though, to go with a short term lease that have more to do with maneuvering the anniversary date of the 1 year lease renewals back into the springtime, for example. Like you might be just as anxious to give somebody a 6 month lease over the winter as they are to get one. You're both trying it out, and you don't necessarily charge them more rent. But I have one as we speak that I am doing that on. They came in 2 or 3 months ago, and I gave them the option of signing a year and a half lease that I would keep the rent the same the whole time, or signing just a 6 month lease. And then we'd talk about a new rental rate in the spring. And that 6 month lease was going to be at a higher amount. And that's what they chose.
Yeah, I mean, that's a good point because you want to be kind of strategic with the leases because trying to fill a unit in January or February can be tough. So if you can kind of manipulate the end date so that you're coming up in the spring or the summer, that's
Right.
going to just make you more money in the long run.
Right. Yeah, and tenants also, I think, would rather not be moving in the winter. I mean, this is one of the selling points that you have whenever it's fall and you ask somebody to take it could be 15, 16, 17, 18 month lease, whatever it is to get it to the month that you want this apartment to renew so that it's maybe you're doing it partly because you want to not have it on a month where you got other ones that are coming up,
Right.
and you want to, kind of even out your workload a little bit. The selling point is that not only would you keep the rent the same during the whole time period, longer than a year, in other words, but you say, look, if we do a 1 year lease, you're kind of like gonna forever be stuck moving in the winter here.
Right.
Because every time if you move out of our place in a year, well, you're moving in the winter, and now
Yeah.
you got a 1 year lease at somebody else's place. So.
So have you found that there's a certain dollar amount where maybe if you're going to make an upgrade or do some kind of improvement to the property, that's just not worth it? Like if you're going to spend $5,000 on an upgrade and it's going to only make you $50 a month, like that may not be worth it. Like, have you found a dollar figure that's kind of the sweet spot?
No, not when you've been in the business as long as I have. You realize that there are just things to do from time to time that are just part of keeping that property where you want it, that you can't translate directly into, the $50 rent increase or something like that, on the immediate basis. You like, I still have the first property that I bought. I still have the first three properties that I bought starting in 1978. And, uh, there are things like roofs and stuff like that you've considered more capital expense, but there are other things that you just kind of got to do from time to
Yeah.
time in the apartment that might, cost several $1,000s, like it just might be time for new kitchen cabinets,
Right.
and you aren't you yeah, you're going to maybe raise the rent when you're turning it over because it's not something you do while tenants are living there. I'm talking about stuff that you do in between tenants. And there are things that you would do that allow you to raise the rent somewhat, but those are also maybe things that the usefulness of that uh, upgrade is going to be spread out over a lot of years.
Right. Yeah. I mean, there's definitely some things you're going to do that, the roof is a good example where that's not going to get you a penny more in rent, but
Right.
it's something you've got to do to keep the property up and running. So have you found that there's
But
any
on the other hand, like you said, though, there are things that you would do, and like in my example, several $1,000s, maybe a new kitchen or bath,
right.
that does translate
Right,
into,
absolutely. Yeah.
but it could be that it's not like it might take years to pay for that. It's just that it's what you got to do if you're holding a property
Yep.
long.
Yep. So have you found that there's any upgrades that aren't worth it, that you didn't get any more rent, it didn't make the property nicer, it was just kind of a waste of money?
Well, actually, I think it's more in the area of it did make the property nicer, but it wasn't really. You were to the point of no return. You know, like let's say granite countertops compared to Formica countertops or laminate in a lower level apartment. I mean,
Right.
you could spend that money, but that's coupled with fancier plumbing fixtures that are beyond the expectations of people that are willing to live in that neighborhood, in that house, with
Mhm.
that size of place. There's still a limit to what they're going to pay, no matter how nice your granite countertops and top of the line plumbing and lighting fixtures are.
Well, if you've enjoyed Joel's knowledge today and all the information he shared, you're definitely going to enjoy his book. Joel has written a really good book about rental properties. Tell us about your book.
Well, first thing I want to say to your audience, Dan, is that my book contains at the beginning in the acknowledgments section one part that mentions this guy named Dan Lane. That's the acknowledgement. Dan was the first to ask me to be a guest on a podcast. This is many years ago at this point. And we think a lot alike about rental and real estate. And Dan was also the first to encourage me to author this book and continue to encourage me until its completion. So,
Well, I
to give you an
appreciate
idea
that.
how far back that goes, I first mentioned to you and started telling you I was putting the notes together for this in 2020 when I was sitting around the house during COVID and couldn't
Right.
go anywhere.
That's right. Yep.
Well, that book took about 4 years to get on the market. It came out in the toward the end of 2024. But this book is called Build Real Estate Wealth, and the subtitle is Enjoy the Journey of Rental Property Investment. It's available, on all the major platforms, Amazon, and you can go to my website that's dedicated to the book, which is very simple. It's Joel Miller Books. Books is plural, joelmillerbooks.com, and they'll tell you all about it.
If you want to look that up later on, I've got a link to Joel's book on my website. You can find it at rentalincomepodcast.com/episode 558. I'd like to thank Shaylee Ridge from Ridge Lending Group for sponsoring today's episode. If you're looking to buy a rental property, whether you're just getting started or you want to add to your portfolio, reach out to Shaylee. She's a nationwide lender. She has a ton of different loan programs, and she can find something that works for you. If you want to track her down, just go to ridgelendinggroup.com, NMLS 42056. Thank you so much for checking out the podcast today. Make sure you hit that follow or subscribe button, and that way you'll get notified when the next episode comes out. My name is Dan Lane, and this has been the Rental Income Podcast.